big weekend for the Irish provinces in the Champions Cup. Not so much in terms of potentially not making it to the knockout stages, but in terms of seeding, there's still a lot to play for. Stade Francais against Connacht is on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Ulster against Claremont is Saturday at 5:30. Leinster are at direct to play Bath at 1 o'clock on Saturday, and then Munster against Wasps is at 3:15 on Sunday. Delighted to say Alan Quinlan is with us this morning. Alan, how are you getting on?
I'm very good. Good morning, lads. How are you?
Yeah, all good. Let's start with the Ireland squad before we get into those, because as I say, there's not a whole pile of jeopardy in terms of not making the knockout stages in terms of the Heineken Champions Cup. But the Ireland squad was interesting, and I'm interested to get your take on what Andy Farrell does with some of the newer players that are in the squad. And I'm not talking about the uncapped players. And if we assume that, say, Ireland are going to try and keep it tight up front and go with the tried and trusted in the forwards, especially for that first game at home to Wales, do you see there being any curveballs at all in Andy Farrell's backline to just try and give a few more minutes? Like, I'm talking about the likes of Hume and Baloucoune here, and then potentially even the likes of Lowry and Mac Hansen later into the Six Nations.
I think it'll be the tried and trusted, particularly the first game. There'll be no surprises there, given what they produced in November. And I think, look, Andy Farrell has brought a lot of young players, capped a lot of players in the last 2 years. I suppose there's an expectation now and a feel-good factor back with this team leading into the Six Nations. That can be dampened very quickly by some poor results, but the squad kind of picked itself. Michael Lowry and Robert Baloucoune are two players that have been playing really well for Ulster. And, you know, when you perform in Europe the week before a squad selected, you're always going to get noticed by the selectors. I think James Hume has been very good for all season for Ulster, but it's difficult for the likes of James Hume to knock Gary Ringrose or Robbie Henshaw or Bundy Aki out of that centre spot. If they underperform, yes, I think he should get an opportunity. I think Baloucoune, the door is slightly open now with James Lowe's injury. I'd certainly be pushing to try and get Robert Baloucoune into the team if possible, because of his athleticism, speed, power. He's a big guy. Obviously, he needs to get better in certain areas. Like, you know, you can pick holes in young players, a young player's ability like his, but there's going to be no real curveballs. I think Gavin Coombs is someone that from Munster who is back playing well. I think he's found some form, but it's going to be so difficult to dislodge Caelan Doris, Peter O'Mahony, Jack Conan, Josh van der Fleer, all these guys who played really well. So opportunities maybe against Italy, which unfortunately we were speaking about this every year, but I think Andy Farrell will probably make some changes in that game in round 3.
In fairness, Baloucoune starting the first weekend of the Six Nations would be granted injury enforced because of James Lowe's situation at the moment, but that would be something that we wouldn't have maybe seen a month or two ago. So, like, is that something you actually expect to happen, or do you expect Andy Farrell to go for potentially the safer option, not necessarily a bad one at all, in Andrew Conway?
Yeah, well, I think Andrew Conway probably, because he started in November, I think there's a position free on the left wing. Whether Andrew Conway can move there, maybe, and Baloucoune can go right wing. Keith Earls will have a say in that as well. I'm not sure. I just think to get someone like Baloucoune into the team, I think before November, I like the idea. This guy has just got out and out pace. He's obviously, his game has to develop a little bit more, and dealing with the mental pressures of playing international rugby, it's always you have to see how the player goes. But I think he's a confident player, and he's, like I say, he's got that incredible gas. So to get someone like him into the team, and even with Conway's pace in the other wing, it's a shame for James Lowe, because I think he answered some critics in November and played really well, and it's a shame that he's injured. But Andy Farrell did this with Hugo Keenan as well. Hugo Keenan came on the scene 2 years ago, or a year now.
Alan's just frozen there. We'll get him back in just a moment to look ahead to
half a going.
Sorry, you're there. You're back there, Alan. Sorry, keep going. Apologies, you just dropped out there for a sec.
Yeah, my apologies. But look, I think he's certainly in the mix, and but it's hard to see any other changes before the Welsh game, because the team probably picks itself from November.
Yeah.
And just moving on to the Champions Cup, a great weekend ahead in that as well, Alan. I suppose the big game probably is the Connacht game, knowing that they've a lot on the line against Stade Francais at 1 p.m. on Sunday. So I suppose for them, they need to win this game to go to the last 16.
I think what happened to them last weekend is obviously they've had to dust themselves down and get ready to go to France. I think Stade have only 2 points in Pool B, so they're out of it effectively. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to think in these pool games, Aisling, that in these last games that 6 or 7 points could get you into the round 16. In both the pools, it's crazy. There's probably 2 to 3 teams in each group who are out of it, but it's not as competitive as we would like. Certainly, I think the postponed games that were given as draws certainly affected it being more competitive this weekend. Connacht could lose the game and still go through on 8 points, but I don't think they'll want to take that chance, and I don't think they'll have major issues against Stade on Sunday. I'd be very surprised if Stade Francais' approach to this game was in any way showed a lot of desire to win it. I'm sure they'll pick a team, and professional players go out in the field to try and impress the coach. And sometimes it's even more dangerous if you pick squad players, because they want to make a name for themselves. So it's potentially a tricky one for Andy Friend and Connacht, but I think they're going to be too strong, and I think I'd fancy him to not just to win it, but to get a bonus point win on Sunday. Physically, it's going to be a test, because Stade Francais have a big side, big pack of forwards, but Connacht dismantled them pretty easy in the sports ground when they played. So they've just got to get themselves mentally right for this, and I don't see them see anything but a win here for Connacht.
And just when you mentioned they have to get themselves mentally right, to lose the way they did against Leicester Tigers last weekend in the 79th minute, they had an 18-point lead at one stage. It's very tough, I think, for them to come away and understand what happened there.
It is maybe initially, but I think when you look at the video and you analyse it, I think there's certain things that happen in the game, and just a little bit of control defensively, coming up with some big tackles, staying switched on, all that stuff. And I've been in games before, actually, where you're in that position and you let a lead slip or things go wrong, and I don't think they want to keep hearing about their growth and development. I think that game was there it was won, but you're playing against a very good side, and teams don't switch off, and good sides don't switch off, and Leicester are a very good side. So it was a harsh lesson for Connacht. But if they were gone out of Europe and facing this weekend with nothing to play for, it would be much more difficult for Andy Friend to pick up his side. There's loads to play for. If they finish with a positive performance in Paris at the weekend, they can get themselves into the round 16 and really look forward to having a crack and being in the knockout stages. That's where they need to be, and I'm sure that's one of their goals, to be in the knockout stages. When you think there's 8 teams out of the 24 going to miss out, and to be in that 16, there's more wriggle room to get into it, but I think that's an achievement, and that's a step for Connacht, and that's where they want to try and get that consistency and be in the knockout stages.
It's an interesting one, because there's obviously a huge excitement element to the last day of the Champions Cup when you've got all this jeopardy and going straight to quarterfinals and all these teams getting knocked out. At the same
it's
time,
different this time on. Yeah, it's
completely
different, unfortunately.
But at the same time, Connacht would obviously be in the mix if it wasn't that format. They're sixth in Pool B at the moment, and they would be in the mix. But this format does give a team like Connacht a greater opportunity to qualify for knockout rugby, which, let's not forget, is going to be over 2 legs. Like, whoever they get in that next round, that is going to be a huge moment, one of those games in the sports ground as well, for Connacht. Like that is going to be a huge step forward for this province, even if we disregard the fact that it was easier to qualify for the knockout stages this season than it was 2 years ago. The benefit of this format is giving teams outside of the exclusive enclosure the opportunity to go on a pretty historic run and then bring their own standards up to a whole other level over the next couple of seasons.
It does, yeah, for sure. The new format and COVID has caused issues here with this competitiveness. I think I'm still a fan of the old format, the 6 pool games, quarter-final, semi-final, final. I think the format was changed, and it was a big push for French and English clubs to change the format. It was obviously increased because of COVID. To 24 teams. So I don't have the perfect answer to this one, but I am a little bit disappointed. It does give Connacht the opportunity. Wasps could qualify in Pool B. Even if they didn't beat Munster, they can still qualify on 6 points, which is, to me, winning a game and drawing a game out of 4, and you're going into the knockout stages. I think it needs to be a bit better than that. Now, a lot of this has been out of EPCR's control, and I think they've done a really good job in managing the whole thing. And it's been crazy trying to get fixtures. Obviously, Leinster would disagree, but by and large, it's a brilliant competition that I've always loved. I would love to see, us looking at 5 or 6 or 7 games this weekend that are all on the line. But that's not the case, unfortunately. But it is what it is. It gives Connacht a great opportunity. And Wasps, who were dead and buried after round 1, you think when Munster beat them over there, they're probably going to go through this weekend as well. So it does make great excitement. And for Connacht to play a round 16 game in Gaul, home and away, it's going to be, you wouldn't bet against them no matter who they're playing, because they're that type of a team who would just throw the kitchen sink at it and really go for it. And maybe something like that happened last weekend would benefit them going forward.
And it's a little bit different, Quilly, for the rest of the provinces having already qualified. There's Ulster versus Claremont on Saturday at 5:30. I suppose for them, they'll want to get as much points as they can to be as far up the leaderboard as they can. To maybe home advantage would be massive for them.
Yeah, and Ulster, obviously, we scrutinise them a lot about their consistency and their up and down nature, in a sense. I think when they play well, with a lot of tempo and confidence, they can be very, very effective. But we've seen brittle sides to their team over the last number of seasons. For them to finish against Claremont in Belfast with a win and get 4 out of 4 would be a great end to that to the pool stages for them. Potentially they can be, the top seeds in Pool A. Racing are on 14, Ulster on 14. So they're going to be in the top 2, which will give them, the second leg around 16 at home, which is, there's a little bit of an advantage in that, and having a quarter-final and a semi-final at home if you get there. So there is big ramifications to it. But I think there's more. I think Ulster, under Dan McFarland, have shown real glimpses. They had a big win down in Dublin against Ulster, against Leinster. But the real standout one for me that wasn't a full Leinster side, but the real standout one was the victory in Claremont. And the way they came back from having a decent lead, Claremont came back and went ahead, and they reacted again. So I think they've done really well. These kind of games are potential banana skin, because Claremont are a side who are only at 7 points, and if they lose this game, potentially they might slip out of the running, and they're a side that have always kind of approached Europe in a very positive way. So it's a dangerous one for Ulster, but certainly it should be a humdinger on Saturday evening at 5:30.
A lot of eyebrows were raised this week, Alan, when it was reported that Jason Jenkins will be moving from Munster to Leinster. Yeah. Have you managed to get your head around this one over the last couple of days?
I've had a few people texting me and tweeting me. A lot of Leinster people were at every opportunity, saying that, well, this player and that player is blocking pathways for players down at Munster. So some of them have gone quiet in the last few days, with Jason Jenkins looking like he's going to sign for Leinster. Maybe he'll block someone's pathway there. But look, on a serious note, I think I can't comment on the quality of the guy, because we've seen nothing of him. Nobody has. He's big, he's physical, and it's probably an area where Leinster are a little bit light, and having a physical presence like Jenkins come in certainly makes sense. But it's kind of strange that, Leinster lose a lot of players over the years. Now they're gaining one back from Munster, but I think there wasn't room, obviously, to keep him in Munster with R.G. Snyman staying on. Thomas Ahern has come through, and Owen O'Connor, Finian Wycherley. So I think it didn't make sense for him to stay. And maybe he'll be a very good signing for Leo Cullen's side.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. Alan, great stuff. You can check out the Red 78 podcast as well for a good preview of the Munster game this weekend as well. Thanks a million.
Cheers, thanks lads.
Cheers, Alan Quinlan there on the line. It is 11 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors.